The five best practices for working remotely for a small business is to number one, establish to number one, establish a communications plan. This means that we need to develop uh, an in-office work environment. Sometimes employees need to get questions answered quickly, just walk a few places to a colleague's workstation. But unfortunately, that's not always possible with remote work. So you need to set up a good communication plan, like, Zoom or Google Places, things like that. The second item that needs to be considered is you need to invest in the right technology tools. You need to make sure that the employees are equipped with, state-of-the-art computer systems, audio, video products, and tools, and so forth. And the next item is to make sure your expectations are clear and you've set some reasonable and measurable goals, very important goals. And then, of course, you need to provide social support, because people interact in the company and, somebody's anniversary or whatever. And it'd be sort of nice to do a little Zoom meeting like that. And then lastly, you need to make sure you have a security plan, because these are business secrets or, methods and so forth that, it's the lifeblood of a company. So it's very important. The first step you need to perform is what's called a situation analysis. And that basically it's to determine the capabilities within your organization and the status of your organization's communications. And this starts with what's called a SWOT analysis. SWOT basically examines the strengths and the weaknesses of your organization. So that's step one, the situation analysis. The next step in the process is to define your goals. And speaking of goals, the acronym SMART comes into mind. SMART stands for specific, S stands for specific. So make sure your goals are specific, clearly thought out. The M stands for measurable, A, attainable, R, relevant, and T, time sensitive. Understanding and profile your key audience. Understanding your audience and their requirements, characteristics, etc., is the key to creating an effective message and delivering it successfully. Your key audience could be within your organization or your customers. Either way, you should gather information on them and create a simple audience personas. Decide the media channels and create a strategy. As you conduct your research on the target audience, you'll get to know their requirements and preferences are diverse. It's clear that you won't be able to reach all of them through one media channel or retain their attention with one type of content. Consider the most effective channels you can think of when creating your media channel strategy. Make sure to select the ideal channel when you are targeting different audience segments. The next step is to create a timetable for publishing your project. When do you want your audience to hear the message? How often? And so forth. Usually a Gantt chart is a really good idea for your publishing strategy. And the final step is to monitor and evaluate the results. Constantly monitoring and tracking your results to understand whether you've accomplished your goal or not is very important, and it's the last part of the process, so to speak. As you probably know, there's many advantages to running a business remotely, especially with the advent of the internet makes things much easier. However, there still are challenges that we face when we run a business remotely. The first of which is the time differences. If your company is in Florida, for example, and your customers are in California, well, of course, there's the time difference, and it's even more of an issue when it's overseas, for example, Europe. So that's one of the issues of running it remotely. The second is employee, let's say, loyalty. I mean, how do you know the person's really working, doing their job? How do you monitor and so forth without becoming an autocratic type or autocratic, I guess, manager? Um, so there's that issue. And of course, there's the economies of scale. So running a business remotely, now this would be not, well, I guess it could be a challenge. Um, where to house the personnel. I mean, normally you get an office space in a big building and so forth, and you do that. But if the person's working out of their home or remote office, you got that. How does that expense get taken into consideration? And those are just a few of the challenges of running businesses remotely. How do companies motivate employees and how do they manage them remotely? Well, the motivation's pretty straightforward, simple. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to working remotely, aka working from home. Of course, there's no commute, flex time. I mean, you could work at 2 in the morning if you want to. And of course, this leads for more time with your family and friends. And how do we manage these remote workers? Well, you have to set some clear rules and objectives and things like that. For example, weekly meetings very important, and also management by objectives would be the key there. Here's the task. This is what you need to do. The task needs to be well defined. Here's the deadline. Here's how you collaborate with your team members, and so forth. And then if the work's getting done, if it's getting done right and everybody's happy, then great.
To summarize, um, working remotely is definitely becoming a more and more popular these days because of all the advantages that I've mentioned, as well as some of the drawbacks. However, in the long run, for certain businesses, certain industries, it certainly makes sense. Of course, if you're running the factory, I mean, obviously people have to be at the plant to make the parts and so forth. But if you're a software engineer, designer, architect, things of that nature, it makes a lot of sense. So, thank you.